Hey guys, Ben here with Oddly Armed, and today we're going to be adding our first bullpup to the tier list, and where better to start than with the Israeli IWI X95. So let's go ahead, get into it, talk about a little bit of history on this rifle and its predecessor, and then get a close look and get it on our tier list. Now, since the X95 is the first bullpup that we're doing for the tier listing, I figured that the first question we should really answer with it is, what is a bullpup? So a bullpup is a rifle or submachine gun, pretty much any firearm, where the actual working group, so that your bolt carrier group, your trigger mechanism, all that is going to be behind the firer's shooting hand, so behind the trigger here on the rifle. So if you take a look at a more traditional rifle, so this one of course being a G36, this one's a Tommy built, you have that trigger behind the magazine, so this is going to be your standard configuration rifle. Now, some of the benefits of a bullpup is it gives you a shorter overall length, but with a longer overall barrel. So again, this is going to be an 8.9 inch barrel for the G36. This is a C variant, and it's going to be about the same length with a can on it as the X95. So that's really where you get some of your main advantages of a bullpup over a standard configuration rifle. Now, where you do lose a little bit going to a bullpup platform is in terms of ergonomics. So your reload's going to be a little bit more awkward because you're going to be reaching behind your arm instead of in front of it. And it's just going to be very different in terms of ergonomics compared to your standard rifle. So we're going to keep it fairly brief on the history of the X95 today, and that's because eventually we're going to be doing the SAR-16, which was the predecessor to the X95 and in a lot of ways about the same design. But that was the original Tavor model that was adopted by the IDF after they decided to get rid of the Galil ARM and kind of supplement the ARs that they already had in their inventory. So getting into the X95, it really started back in 2009 when the IDF had kind of pinpointed some issues with the original SAR-16. And they weren't necessarily issues, more of just some modifications that would make it a little bit easier, more convenient for the soldiers to use. Now, in the Israeli Defense Force IDF terminology, this is also known as the TAR-21 or the Micro Tavor. And that's going to be one of the biggest differences between this and the original series of Tavor. Is in IDF service, they actually shorten the barrel from, I think, around 16.5 inches down to what you see here, which is 13 inches. So, of course, this is a registered SBR, so I'll go ahead and get that out of the way. It does have a short barrel, and there are different variants of the X95 that you can get on the US market with longer, either 16.5 or I think 18 or 18.5 inch barrels. Now, some of the other differences that they updated with the X95 Micro Tavor is with some of the ergonomics. One of the main ones being the placement of the charging handle. On the original SAR-16, it was further to the front and on the sides. And then also a good thing to keep in mind in IDF service is they heavily utilize AR variants that they've gotten from the US over years, whether it's from the 90s, older carry handle style ARs, or newer M4, M16 style. They are very heavily utilized in their service, so they wanted to kind of align the Tavor a little bit more with the ergonomics of the AR. And to that end, they went ahead and added an AR style magazine release to the Micro Tavor versus the original one, which had a paddle style release at the front of the magazine. And since the introduction of the X95, it's actually seen quite a bit of military use, whether it's been in the last couple of years or last year and a half or so, in the Gaza Strip as well as southern Lebanon during their incursion there in the invasion of the Gaza Strip, which we're not going to get into in this. But it's been a very well-proven system that's been reliable in their service, and it's gotten a ton of track record behind it when compared to some other modern military bullpups. In 2021, there were some media reports that the X95 was going to be drawn back out of service in Israel, but it doesn't appear that that was actually the case, because you still see these all the time in combat footage in Gaza and in Lebanon. These are still being heavily utilized, whether it's by reservists in the IDF or even some of their more specialized units are still using the X95 to some degree. Now again, that's going to be supplemented by a ton of different ARs, but this is still one of the main rifles that you're going to see in their service. And that's about all we have on the history of the X95. So it's had a pretty short life so far, but still more history to be written on it, I'm sure. So let's go ahead, get into how I have my X95 set up and get a good close look at it. And starting off at the front here, I do utilize my Huxworks HXQD 556K can on this. So that is a flow-through can that doesn't have a ton of back pressure, which we're going to get into why that's important in a little bit. But moving back from there, I also have this IR light on the right side. So this uses a Z-bolt light head, and this is their LED head. However, you can tighten and loosen the beam on it. So that's kind of interesting, and we'll get into why I use that in a second. And then that's also on a Reptilia mount here, and I have a pressure switch running to the other side. Now this pressure switch here is going to go up to my optic, which is a Meprolite MOR or MOR. So this is one of the optics that you actually see in service in Israel, and it's made by Meprolite, a Israeli company. And it also has, if you look at the front here again, 2 apertures. Those are laser apertures. One is going to be an IR laser, and the other is going to be a visible laser. And that's why I have this IR flashlight on there, because this is one of my night vision rifles. And as you can tell, it's also my smallest night vision rifle that's in a rifle caliber. Now moving back from there, we also have a Primary Arms SLX 3-power magnifier on a flip to side mount. And going down, the grip panels I have on here are the IDF style grip panels. So when we get into modularity, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other options there. Then actually back to the front real quick, this is a Black Label bipod handguard that I have mounted on here. And that's a really nice upgrade over the original Picatinny style handguard. And I think that's about it for the right side of the rifle. And taking a look at the left side, up here we just have my can again, and going back you can see the mod button light that I have running over to the flashlight on the other side of the rifle. And then I also have a Manticore Arms forward folding charging handle on this, which is a nice upgrade over the OEM charging handle. Sling mounts for this is another thing which is kind of important, and I have a QD sling mount, just a Magpul one, attached to the top rail of the rifle. And moving back, we got our grip again. I haven't done anything with the safety selector or any of the other features on this side. So you can see on the left side of the Mepro MOR there are controls for it. We have 3 power settings, as well as just the visible laser and the IR laser as well. There's our magnifier, and then I also have a Manticore Arms suppressor gasket on this, so that we're going to get into a little bit more when we get to shooting characteristics on why that is helpful. And that's basically it. The only other thing that we can really talk about is going to be my butt pad on here. Now, from the factory, these come with a rubber butt pad that are about an inch long or so, and that is actually because if you have this flat butt pad on a stock X95 with a 16.5-inch barrel, it will actually be an SBR due to the overall length being over 26 inches. So this, you have to either SBR it or pin and weld a muzzle device to swap it out to this flat butt pad. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the ratings for the X95 and start things out with accuracy, where it's going to get a score of 3, with me being able to coax about a 3.1 MOA group out of it using 55 grain GGG Lithuanian M193 ammunition at 100 yards. So that isn't particularly accurate, and from the very beginning of the X95 hitting the US market, it's been known to have kind of lackluster accuracy compared to some other options on the market. Now, there's an argument to be made that in something like a Bullpup like this, particularly the SBR with a 13-inch barrel, do you really need to have that be a sub-MOA rifle? But in any case, that's something that comes up quite a bit when people talk about this rifle. Second category we're getting into is going to be the aftermarket support for the X95, where it's going to get a score of 4. That's because the X95, if you couldn't already tell from the way I have mine set up, has a ton of aftermarket support from quite a few different manufacturers for it. So there are a couple different companies, one Black Label bipod, which is where I get my handguard from. They also have a handguard with an integrated bipod, which is kind of cool. Then you also have Manticore Arms, makes a good amount of different parts for it to include different butt pads, There's also different companies making grips for these, hand guards to include Gearhead Works, different trigger packs as well. Geisley's a really big, well-known one. Timney also makes a trigger pack for the X95, as well as Shooting Sights is another one. So you also have charging handles, so my Manticore Arms one on here. And that's pretty much it. There's a ton of stuff that you can actually swap out on these, which makes it one of the most versatile bullpup platforms in the US at this point, in my opinion. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at durability, where the X95 is going to get a score of 4. Now, I will say that all of the polymer used in IWI products has been very good in my experience. It's well made, kind of has this cool pebbly texture to it, but I've never had an issue with the polymer. Now on the X95, there's also like a metal chassis on the inside of this polymer stock that everything rides in. That's also very well made, and I don't expect that to break at any point. Now I am going to dock at a point, and that is in a very specific case, which is the removal of the barrel. You can actually cause some damage to the rifle, and I think this is something maybe they could have designed a little bit better. But in any case, to remove the barrel, first you have to take off the handguard, and you absolutely must take out the charging handle, or else when you go and turn the little key here on the side, you are going to end up damaging and bending that charging handle. So that's a very important thing, which I absolutely screwed up, and I've gone through actually more than one charging handle between my X95 as well as my Tavor due to screwing that up. Now there's another thing on the other side of the rifle. Before you spin this wheel here on this side, you have to push in this little lever and lift it above the receiver so it can turn. Now, at one point I didn't do that, and I went to go remove the barrel, and I ended up breaking that lever so it no longer locked in place correctly. So I did have to replace that part as well. So just based on some of the intricacies there and how easy it is to forget a step and end up destroying a charging handle or that barrel lock, I'm going to dock at a point. And next up, we're going to talk about ergonomics, where the X95 is going to come in with a score of 4. And that's because it's really one of the better designed bullpups as far as the actual ergos go. So taking a look at it, you can see there we have the right side of the safety selector. And on the left side, we just have that one. Now it is reversible, so if you are left-handed, you can swap that around. And then you can also see right above that is going to be the mag release, which is on both sides as well. And in about the same place it is on an AR-15, except maybe a little bit further back, so it can be a little bit different, but it's still very familiar for anyone who's used to the AR-15 platform. Now, as far as the charging handle goes, right now I have it here on the left side, so you can see that Manticore Arms charging handle, which just pulls back there. And you can see on the right side, we also have a track, so it is reversible between the two sides of the rifle. Now, the one place I'm actually going to ding the X95 a little bit is going to be the bolt catch and the bolt release. So that is going to be this lever on the bottom side of the rifle there. So you can kind of see how it's pressed out right now because I have the bolt back. To release the bolt, all you have to do is press up on that, and it'll drop your bolt home. Now, without a magazine in there to actually go ahead and actuate that, you can pull down on this. However, it is a little bit awkward, which is where I'm going to drop that point because it's more of a three-handed operation to lock that bolt back. Next up in the tier listing is going to be the maintenance, where I'm going to drop the X95 down to a 3. And the 2 points lost there are going to be for 2 separate issues. The first being the ease of cleaning, which is kind of a pain with the X95 due mainly to how tight everything is in the receiver. There's not a lot of room to get your hand in there to clean off some of the rails on the inside of the receiver, and that's just because of the design of the rifle. There's just not many places for your hand to really get in there to clean stuff off. Now that can be a good thing as well because that means dirt's not necessarily getting in there, but as far as cleaning goes, it's just a little bit more difficult than most other designs. Now, it also comes with its own specialized cleaning kit. I'm pretty sure all X95s and Tavors still come with that. And one piece of equipment in there is going to be a long brush, and that's specifically to clean inside here. You have your gas cylinder, since this is a long stroke gas piston system, so you have to have a brush that can reach basically all the way from the back of the stock here into the receiver to go ahead and clean out that gas piston. The second point I'm going to docket is going to be due to a lack of bolt replacements on IWI's website. Now, they do have readily available firing pins as well as extractors, which is fantastic, but I didn't see bolts sold separately on their website. So if you do break a lug, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to get it directly from IWI, and I'm not seeing many other places, or really any other places, at least as of today, that were selling replacement bolts. And our next category is going to be modularity, where the X95 is going to come in with a score of 4. And that's because it's really one of the more modular modern bullpup rifles on the market. There's quite a bit that you can change out on these. For example, the butt pads we already talked about, so a lot of those can be changed out for NFA issues if you need a little bit more length here. The handguards, so as you can see, I already changed out the handguard on mine. And there are multiple different other options out there from Manticore Arms. There's the stock handguard, which is actually not bad and comes with rail covers as well as Picatinny rails on it. And then you can also change out the grip here. There's aftermarket grips. The original one comes with a cutlass style grip, which you saw in an earlier portion of the video. And I swapped mine out for the one with a standard trigger card style grip. And then when we're talking about the magazines on these, there's pretty much no issues using any mag I've tried in it. So standard AR mags like Lancers or any generation of Magpul is going to work in here. I haven't really tried a D60 or some of the more rare options like some of the Surefire quad stack magazines. So I can't confirm if those will work, but with your standard 30 or 20 rounders, you're almost guaranteed to have success. And the last point in modularity is going to be barrel swaps, which I talked before about how you can pull out barrels on this. So mine originally came with a 16.5-inch barrel, and I SBR'd it and swapped it with the factory 13-inch barrel. But there's also caliber conversion kits specifically for 300 blackout, as well as a 9mm kit, which is kind of cool. It converts it to a straight blowback 9mm bullpup that uses Uzi magazine, so that's actually a pretty cool option there. And next up, we're going to have price, where it comes in with a score of 3, and that's because the X95 typically comes in at around $1,500 to $1,800 on the new market. Now, every once in a while with sales, you might find it coming in closer to the $1,300 point, but generally that 15 to 18 is what you're going to see. Now, as far as the cost for replacement parts on these, it's actually not incredibly expensive. It's pretty moderate, not going to be as cheap as like an AR, but as far as designs outside of an AR go, it's not overly expensive. And next up, we have shooting characteristics, where I'm going to give the X95 a score of 4. And starting with the trigger on the X95, it really comes with the best out-of-the-box bullpup trigger out of pretty much anything on the market, with the exception of maybe the Desert Tech MDRX and now the Wolverine, which I haven't really gotten my hands on one of the newer ones since I had the original MDR, which was not good. So I can't really speak to the trigger on that, but as far as like the AUG, the FS2000, that VHS, this is going to have the best out-of-the-box trigger, even better than the original Tavor. Now, in terms of recoil, the X95 is actually a pretty smooth shooter in terms of bullpups. It's not going to be as nice and smooth as a well-tuned AR, but it is going to be fairly light. The bolt's moving pretty quick though, so you still get a bit of a snap, but it's not terrible. Now, the place where I'm really going to be taking that point for shooting characteristics away is going to be its characteristics as a suppressor host. So we already talked about having the HXQD 556K as my can on the X95, and that's because you really need a flow-through can to make this a good suppressed shooter. And that's because the X95 is already fairly overgassed from the factory, being a long stroke gas piston system, as well as it doesn't have an adjustable gas block. So it's already going to be overgassed and really needs to have that flow-through can to be a good shooter with a can on it. Now, you can use a full back pressure can on it, but you will get a good amount of gas to the face. And that's actually where the gasket from Manticore Arms comes in, because that better seals the ejection port cover that you're not using, because of course you can swap this with a new bolt between right side eject and left side eject. So you have to have that ejection port on both sides of the rifle to be able to do that, and that's where some of the gas escapes around it. Now, that Manticore Arms gasket, greatly helps with that and reduces that gas, but you will end up with this black line of carbon against your cheek from where your face is really pressed up against it. Now with a flow-through can, it does cut back drastically on the amount of gas that you're getting back from the system. It makes it much more pleasant to shoot. I also do want to note that with this 16.5-inch barrel, there were rumors that if you used high back pressure can on it, you could potentially damage the rifle. I have not seen anything that really corroborates that at all, but it is something that there was a rumor about for a little bit. When it comes to reliability, I'm going to give the X95 a 5. That's because I've never had any malfunctions with mine through thousands of rounds of shooting. I've had my X95 for, I want to say, over 6 years at this point, and I've never had any problems with it at all. And the final category is going to be weight. And it's going to come in with a score at 3, and that's because the X95 is a bit of a chonker, coming in at 7.5 pounds in its SBR configuration from the factory. So it's still a fairly heavy rifle, but bullpups in general are going to be a little bit heavier than similar sized standard style rifles. And when we go ahead and add up all the categories, we come out with a score of 37 for the X95, which puts it solidly in the middle of A tier. And I think it really does deserve that score because this is one of my favorite bullpup rifles from a practicality standpoint. It's always worked for me. It's been very reliable. It's been a good shooter, and one of the bullpups I really gravitate towards when I need something I can trust. And the final thing we're going to talk about is how I think the X95 scores in terms of coolness. And I'm going to put it in A tier, and that's because it is a really interesting rifle as far as some of the current use that it's getting, but it just doesn't quite get to that level of gravity that you see from some other designs that are a little bit more interesting. It is still a cool looking rifle that does get some pop cultural references. So like in Call of Duty, the TAR-21 from, I think it was like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 or something, there was the Tavor in that one. And you see it in games fairly frequently nowadays, but movies as well. So it'll pop up in movies every once in a while. So it does absolutely have that kind of gravitas towards it, but not as cool as something like the SG553 or some other designs that we're going to get into down the line. So I just want to thank you guys for coming along for our third video in the tier listing, and thanks for all the support, and I really look forward to keeping this going, getting as many rifles onto the tier list as possible. So like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll appreciate if you guys come back and check out some more of my videos.